I came to this work because it transformed me as a person. My intentional use of psychedelics and the integration of those experiences has made me into a much different person than I was 10 years ago. So this is a vocation. It's something that's a passion for me, and it's something that I want to share with as many people as I can.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Psychedelic Conversations podcast. So thrilled to have you here. And we have today on the show, Greg Lawrence. Greg, I believe you're from LA. So welcome to our show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great to have you. So just to give a context about and a background to our listeners, I'll just read a small bio from you. So Greg Lawrence is a psychedelic integration and transformational coach in Los Angeles. In addition to his private practice, Greg serves as an integration for the Transpersonal Center in Los Angeles and various retreat centers. He has been facilitating integration circles for PsychedeLiA in Los Angeles for over 5 years and is a member of Innerspace Integration Provider Network. That's amazing. So I'm really looking forward to dig into the integration aspect of the psychedelic work. So before we begin, Greg, as traditionally always, we like to know your story and how did you come into working with psychedelics or come into the psychedelic integration offerings. So that would be nice if you can tell us about your background.
All right. Well, I came into psychedelic integration for personal reasons because it was necessary originally. I worked with psychedelics, or I should say I consumed psychedelics along with a lot of other things from my late teens through my late 20s. And like I said, I consumed a lot of other things. I drank, I did a lot of different drugs. I smoked cannabis constantly. And unfortunately, in my late 20s, I got mixed up with hard drugs. And my life pretty much spiraled out of control. At one point, I was living in a very bad place, and I actually don't remember. I remember having a car when I moved there, but I don't know what happened to my car. I know that eventually I didn't have a car, and I had no idea what I was going to do. I was out of a job. I had an expensive habit, and I had no idea what's going to happen. And fortunately, I was extracted from that environment by someone and realized that I needed to move away from the environment I was in. I needed to cut contact with the people who I was in contact with for all the time I was growing up. And I moved away. And I started pretty much a quiet suburban life. And I stopped using all substances except for cannabis, which I abused for about 20 years. And about 9 years ago, my life pretty much got turned upside down. I was in a very bad place. I was deep in grief. And I realized that I had a lot of childhood trauma that had not even been acknowledged, much less addressed. So I needed help. I sought out a therapist. I sought out a coach. And at the time I was smoking cigarettes, and I told my coach I was trying to quit. And he said, I read there's some study that says psilocybin helps with that. And I thought, well, I know about mushrooms. So I found some mushrooms and I took them. And I will tell you, there is a tremendous difference in the effect that psychedelics have based on your intention. So a lot of people say, yeah, I took psychedelics when I was young and it was just fun. And I went to parties, and then I took them lately and I started feeling bad and seeing all these things happen in my life. Well, that's what happened to me. Once you turn inside, that's where psychedelics go. And that first night, I saw everything that had happened in my life. I saw my part in what had happened. I saw the patterns I was locked into. I saw why I was feeling the way I was feeling and what I needed to do to get out. And I thought that, well, now that I've seen that, everything's going to be different. And in about 2 or 3 weeks, it was all the same again. There was this high for a while of thinking like, wow, it's all changed. I'm a different person. And then I just kind of went back into the old patterns. So I tried it a couple of more times and the same thing happened. And I wondered, how is it that I'm having these epiphanies, these new realizations, and making these connections I've never made before and seeing the solutions, and they're just not happening? So I started researching and found out about this thing called integration, which I had never heard of. And I looked around some more and I found an integration circle. That was when I first saw one of those. I became a regular at those. And after a while, I started facilitating them. I started doing some counseling with people. I was doing energy work and I didn't realize it, but people would say things like, that really helped, that suggestion you had. I'm glad we talked about that. I thought about what you said and I realized I was doing some counseling. So I learned more about counseling. I did a lot of studying. I eventually got a integration coach certification. And I started taking clients from one of the coaches that I work with and eventually broke off into a private practice. I've been doing this full time now for about 2.5 years. I've been doing it for 4 years now. I've been doing it full time for about 2.5. I closed down a successful business to start doing this. This work kept coming in and I was kind of telling the universe, hey, do you mind? I'm busy with my work. And eventually I realized, no, this is my work, and cut this out. So I came to this work because it transformed me as a person. My intentional use of psychedelics and the integration of those experiences has made me into a much different person than I was 10 years ago. So this is a vocation. It's something that's a passion for me, and it's something that I want to share with as many people as I can.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. Isn't it common that everybody who receives all these benefits through psychedelic medicines, they somehow find themselves in some way offering or at least helping, guiding people? What are your thoughts on that? It's almost like, we have this inside joke with my other friends who are in the same space, and they say it almost feels like the medicines are like scouting and hiring us to work for them. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that depends on the person. I think that you have to do a lot of work yourself before you know how to help other people. And in integration circles, I can't tell you how many times someone's come in and after the first time of sitting with ayahuasca or mushrooms or what have you, will say, oh, I'm a healer and I need to start serving this medicine. That, I believe, is a very bad idea. It's not something you do right off the bat. We have to do our shadow work. We have to do extensive personal work, and we have to understand what our issues are, or we have no idea how to help other people. I think this is what Ram Dass meant when he said, all I can do for you is work on myself. All you can do for me is work on yourself. When we change ourselves, that change does ripple out, like the ripples in a pond when you throw a stone in. Somehow we notice that people around us somehow are transforming. That's the basic work that we do. But before we jump in and start certainly serving medicine or counseling other people and helping them figure out what to do, we should know what to do ourselves, which means we've done quite a bit of internal work on ourselves. So it depends on where the person is in their path of personal and spiritual development, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
I think it's a great thing that people feel like healers when they're done. But I think sometimes people mistake the message that they're getting in a medicine journey, which says you can heal. You have the power to heal yourself, with you have the power to heal.
Yeah, that's really brilliant. I'd like to go into this a little bit, if you don't mind. I've been in the space for about 7 years, very similar background. And like you said earlier, it was nothing to do, well, I think you probably agree with me, about 5 years, or anybody who came into the medicine space around 6, 7, like anyone before 5 years. It's only in the last 2 years that I'm seeing a lot of people coming in and quitting their job to become a psychedelic integration coaches or therapists. Only because maybe it's becoming too mainstream, and it's just like kind of people see this as a career or another career path. They can just quit their own job, day job, and come into this space. But somehow people that I speak to who's been doing this work longer, somehow they ended up in this space because of their own work. It wasn't an intention of, let me just go and try these psychedelics and then I can become a coach. But it was more like a unintentional, almost organic path that they ended up then becoming, integration coach, which is really beautiful. And seeing in the space, being with lots of people and seeing people taking the medicine to help themselves, it's insane to witness people just coming down from the medicine and thinking, medicine told me that I need to help others and I need to serve this medicine too. This is like, we speak about this among our friends, and it's probably one of the most scariest thing to do. it's emerging really fast. So what is it that, what are your thoughts on this phenomena, that why does psychedelics lend into this way of thinking? Why people do that? Why do they wake up and think, okay, I've taken just one ayahuasca, now I can serve everybody? What is this thing? What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I'll say that messages from medicine should always be questioned. One of my teachers once said before ceremony, you may see a lot of snakes during your journey tonight, but for God's sake, wait 30 days before you tattoo one on your head and rename yourself Cobra. What you see in a journey is not always really a message for you. There are a lot of different levels and depths, and psychedelics speak to us in very novel and unusual ways, because we all have defenses built up against words. We know this. This is why people go to therapy for years and don't hear what the therapist is saying. This is why everyone around you can tell you that you are deserving of love, but somehow you don't think so. Because we have protective mechanisms. We are locked into certain patterns and we can't just change those easily. That's why psychedelics help people change, but there's a lot of work afterwards. Change is not an easy thing to do, because for better or worse, your brain thinks it would be a very bad idea for you to change. This is why it's so hard to develop new habits sometimes. Having said that, this is not a side hustle. This is not something that you do to make money on the side or to quit your job because you don't like it and maybe you'll like this better. This is a commitment, and God bless anyone who wants to do this, but you'd better be ready to face your own shadow and sit in some uncomfortable times and work through some frustrations if you decide that you're going to be in the helping profession in some way, shape, or another. We have this paradox right now where it's necessary for people to have training and guidance in serving of medicine, integration coaching. All of these things need to be somehow not especially standardized, but there needs to be some standard in place, at least a minimum standard. The problem is when you start putting those standards in place, then people see it and it becomes a thing. So now, instead of just having people cowboys off, I'm going to be an integration coach and figuring it out, someone's going to help train them. Well, then I see a training program and I think maybe I can do that. This is one of the problems with this burgeoning field or industry, if you want to call it that, of psychedelics. Things are going to happen in this community, in this and other countries, in this culture, in the alternative culture, that we're not going to like, that may be there for a good reason, but can be used or taken the wrong way. So I think it's great that there are standards being put in place for these things. I think people should think long and hard before they decide that they want to be in the helping profession or serve medicine, because those are two responsibilities which can be taxing and require your attention and require every bit as much focus as a regular job would. Yeah,
that's beautiful. And who should be serving these medicines? What are your thoughts, especially now there are so many organizations coming up with, as you said, integration training, certification programs. Who regulates them? How do they, pop up? Like, I see so many on my feed every day, lots of different organizations. Just, I've never heard of them before. Suddenly they are offering these certifications, and it's very difficult. I think it's a very confusing time right now to really which organizations are authentic, how they are regulated, where do you go for that kind of training. And if anyone's listening here today and they are interested in becoming an integration coach, I get asked a lot. They say to me, where did you get your certification program? And can you recommend us, places that we can go and study the same thing? And I don't know what to say. I stay away from any recommendations right now. So how do we, I know it's a very interesting times we're in, but what are your thoughts? I'm sure you're having these conversations too.
Well, sure. I mean, that's a question that I get, it's in my inbox almost every day from therapists and lay people alike. How can I get into this? Can I talk to you about this? How did you get into it? What do you recommend? That's been very difficult in the past, but I will say that these training programs are part of the same thing. This is going to be a thing and a business. And coaching has always been unregulated, at least in this country. Anyone can call themselves a coach. You need no license at all. In order to be a therapist, You have to have a master's degree. You have to have extensive supervision, thousands of hours, at least in California. I think it's 3,000 hours of supervision after you spend, 6 to 8 years in school. Coaching, you can take a month-long program and get some kind of certification. You're now a coach. As far as what might be valuable coaching, well, I'll tell you that I'm very careful about what I get involved in. And Entheo Nation will have a program coming up right now to train integration coaches. Lorna Liana, who runs that program, is a Indigenous woman of color who's very dedicated to the psychedelic community. She's a person of integrity. So I have agreed to be one of the instructors in that. I know a lot of the other faculty in that, and I know she's been very careful about having the material for that course put together by people who know what they're doing. So this is not a sales pitch, but if I was going to send someone somewhere, I would send them there. I would also look at the Psych School run by Cherie Malcolm Gadassi, who has been an integration coach for longer than most people have been around. Certainly the first person I met when I went to an integration circle, she was sitting there holding space. She was the founder of PsychedeLiA. And she has an extensive program that trains integration coaches in many different facets of this business, if you will. So those are two places I would say I would feel good if people went, if they were going to go somewhere else, because I see a lot of those training programs too, and I have no idea the background of the people running them or what it is that they're imparting to people.
Yeah, absolutely. I know it's a very sensitive area to even recommend or even talk about, unless you know the people behind, who are the facilitators or the organizations. So I'm trying to get those ladies on the podcast as well. Hopefully they will be our guests as well to talk about their journey and what they are providing, especially Entheo Nation. I've been following them too. I've seen your talk as well. You were a guest speaker recently. It was wonderful. It was lovely. It was very informative. I love the panel idea of having many people on the call and just having that conversation. I think it's beautiful.
Oh, you're talking about Plant Spirit Summit.
Yeah, recently, I think only last week, I guess it was just, and I did manage to catch your talk with a panel. It was really great. Honestly, I'm loving these. These are also happening, summits and speaking engagements. I love those.
Conferences, summits, speaking engagements are everywhere. You could pretty much keep busy full time going to psychedelic summits and conferences if you wanted to.
Yeah. But I do like them because, there's so much information is being, spoken.
I think it's fantastic, and it's all levels now. It's not just scientific papers anymore. It's Indigenous people. It's people like myself who have no letters after their name. There are scientists. There's research being conducted. More information, the better, as far as I'm concerned. The more points of view, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So please tell us about what does integration mean, since you're the integration coach. It would be nice to kind of dig into this a little bit more since we have you on the show. I think you're probably our first integration coach on the show. So it's really an honor. So let's talk about the integration piece.
Well, psychedelic integration, I think a lot of people have the idea that it is something spiritual or magical, and somehow you're going to take the effects of the psychedelic experience with you. You'll feel the same ecstasy and joy that you felt during that experience, maybe the connection with the divine. To a certain extent, that's true, but really, psychedelic integration to me is about taking some information from the theme or lesson of your experience. And there is always a lesson in the psychedelic experience. I would first like to say there's nothing wrong with just taking a psychedelic and having fun. I have no problem with so-called recreational use. I prefer to call that celebratory use. I picked that up from a friend of mine. But if you are looking to do something, if you are looking for some sort of change or shift in your life and you're coming to this medicine for healing or to help you in that on that journey, I would say that it's taking the information that you got from your theme or lesson in that experience, because you have co-created it. The substance is the chef, but the pantry is you and your life experience. So everything from this experience comes from you, unless it comes from outside. There are metaphysical and there are other considerations, but as far as the raw material of what's wrong, what's different, what I like, what I don't like, what bothers me, what doesn't, a lot of those things come up. And a lot of the insights and revelations we have during a psychedelic experience are sort of miraculous, because they're the kind of things that some people only get on their deathbeds as regrets. We get them handed to us and we get the chance to do something about them if we want to. So it's about taking this information that I've gotten during this experience and somehow making that a part of my life. Because inevitably during that experience, experience will see that this isn't working. I would rather this go this way. I would rather do that. I would rather not do this. I would rather be here. I'd rather not be there. Doing something about those things. And that may be a perceptual shift. Maybe I set a boundary with someone. Maybe I communicate in a different way that's more productive. Maybe I don't get annoyed in traffic as much. Maybe I make my bed every day. It can be a small thing. Or maybe I make a change in my life somehow. Maybe I see that things aren't working for me and things have to be kind of upended like they did for me. I had to change everything around me. I had to change the people around me. I had to change my physical surroundings. I had to get a new tribe. I had to change everything in my life, and that was a hard process. But as the process of making those changes, understanding along the way that, as I said, your brain thinks it would be a very bad idea for you to change. So a lot of obstacles, a lot of doubts, and a lot of reasons will come up to keep you from doing this, at least right now. You can always do it later. That's one of your brain's favorite things to tell you, that today is not right. Tomorrow's much better, or next week, or maybe in July when your schedule's clear. Those are good times. But your brain is not going to want you to change. So it's a matter of picking the changes that you can get through, picking the changes that make sense. We don't pick 9 things and try to do them all at once. This is why people don't do New Year's resolutions, because they have too many and they're too ambitious about it. We try to pick, starting with some low-hanging fruit, and see what we can do to make you feel better about being in your current situation, or yourself, or your job, or your family life, or whatever it is, to make it easier to be you, to bring you closer to yourself, and ultimately to accept yourself as much as possible. So in this process, I use aspects of cognitive behavioral therapy, neurolinguistic programming, mindfulness, because thoughts can be challenged, reasoned with, or accepted. Those tools help with all of that. I use a lot of different personal and spiritual development disciplines and philosophies, and quite a few tools I've developed myself to help people create new habits, patterns, ways of being and thinking based on the information that they got from their psychedelic experiences. So to me, integration looks like doing or being different after an experience in some way, shape, or form. It doesn't mean that you have to. That just means if you're going to, it's more than just journaling, yoga, and laying in the grass. Because if you were journaling, doing yoga, and laying in the grass before the experience, then doing so afterwards, if that's all you're doing, isn't really integration. You're just doing what you were doing before.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is in-depth integration concept that we always look for and to understand. Because a lot of the times, I think people who work in the space, they are at least come to the medicines to seek help. There's always this question: what is integration? What do I need to do? What do I do? Do I go and change my life? Like, what shall I do with everyone in my life that are toxic or they're problematic, or my job, or whoever, colleagues? I think one of the big one was for me. I have surrounded myself with people, friends that I don't like. So what do I do now? And it was very clear in my experience. So do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean, because what we come to what we may not realize, but when you're on a path of personal and spiritual development, inevitably this thing comes up where we say, the people around me don't understand me. These aren't my kind of people. They're not doing what I want to do. Somehow I don't fit with them anymore. Well, these are people that you brought into your life. There is a strange psychological phenomenon that we bring in people who are going to trigger our wounds, who are going to bump up against us and cause these things to come up for us. Because if it doesn't come up, then it can't be addressed if it's hidden. I surround myself with people who aren't going to upset me. I'm never going to see what upsets me, so I can say, why does that upset me? And what, if anything, can I do about it? So when we start growing in certain ways, the people around us don't necessarily. Sometimes people do change, but inevitably we see our circle of acquaintances, sometimes our work and other places. We're in a place that we don't feel like we fit anymore, because in some ways we don't. We've addressed these wounds. So now it's just people who, I'll give you sort of an extreme example. I worked with a young man who had severe social anxiety. He couldn't walk into a room with, more than 3 people in it without having a panic attack. And after some time of working with me and a therapist, that got much better. And he got to the point where he started developing a new circle of friends. Well, while this was going on, when he first started, he moved away from where he lived with his family. And he was always talking about his two best friends when I first started working with him, how great these guys were. And fast forward about a year and a half, he went back home to visit his mother. And then he said, those guys don't listen to anything that I have to say. They just talk and talk and talk, and they really don't care about me. Not realizing that when he was anxious, he didn't want the spotlight on himself. He just wanted someone who wanted to talk and leave him alone. They fit with him perfectly at the time. Fast forward later, when he made these changes, these people don't fit with him anymore. So that's sort of an extreme example. That's the kind of thing that we do. We bring in people that fit these wounds, who maybe not touch him this much, maybe will aggravate them for us. And after a while, we're like, I don't need this. This is something I needed before and I don't now. And these aren't the kind of people I'm looking for. Having said that, I think we should be gentle. We should never look down and say, well, I'm developed and those people aren't. Those poor fools, they don't know what they're doing. That's where I was before. Yeah. I think Alan Watts once said, those people should be honored. You should look at them and say, wow, look at them. They're going on the same journey I did. They have the opportunity to find this as well.
Yeah. So I love this piece, Greg. I mean, especially in the psychedelic circles, I hear this conversation. I mean, I get to witness a lot of this type of thing where just because people are on the psychedelic medicine path, there is this pride or arrogance that, oh, we are different than those people. We know more because we use the medicine, and we are more upgraded, or we are more conscious or awake. But they are not. I mean, this is like very, very common. That happens all the time that I witness to.
Well, let's realize that everyone thinks that they know and they're awake, and the other people don't know. Mm-hmm. So we may be convinced of that, but we should back up a little bit before we should say that other people don't know. And we should also remember that it wasn't too long ago that we were over there. So I should also point out, when people say, like, how do I get other people to do this? When there's another phenomenon, when people take psychedelics, all of a sudden they want everyone to do psychedelics. And first they'll tell them psychedelics are not for everyone. There are some very subjectively objectionable people. There are white nationalists, racists, misogynists who take psychedelics and have their own worldview strengthened. Psychedelics don't change people who don't want to change. So this meme that says all cops should do ayahuasca, I don't think is very sensible. Everyone doesn't need to do psychedelics. In fact, that would be a very bad idea, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Does that mean that the world might be a better place if more people did? Possibly, if those people wanted to change. But there's another phenomenon where people want people to do psychedelics as soon as they do. Well, I usually tell them, why don't you show people the results, not the experience? So if I have just taken psychedelics and I have all of these issues I'm dealing with, let's take me and my first experience. Oh my God, I've seen all this. Now I know how to fix my life. And for a 3-week period, I thought I was done. Like, everything's great now. And 3 weeks later, I wasn't. But if I went around telling people at that time, I had this great experience, you should do psychedelics, and I was the same person I was with the same issues, well, I just look like the person who's telling you that you need to do P90X or go hiking or whatever someone's own personal obsession is. You need to take 27 supplements a day. Whatever your thing is, running around telling people they need to do it is not the answer. Showing people that you have made improvements in your life and you are somehow a little bit kinder and gentler, people will come to you and ask you how that happened and what you did eventually. But they'll be more impressed with the results than they will with the experience that you had.
That's wonderful. This kind of ties back to the earlier conversation when you said about Ram Dass, all I can do for you is work on me. I love that. Yeah. And thank you for saying that psychedelics not for everybody, and it's a bad idea for everybody to use them. I think 100% agree with you. I always, one of the things that I started speaking more of in my circles is that unless we want to change, they're not different than somebody, using meditation or yoga regularly and really not progressing that much. So I guess this is to do with the mainstream push now, isn't it, Greg? Would you say that we are in the middle of this time where so much mainstream articles are being thrown around and everybody can access these incredible documentaries and, scientific papers now coming really fast. So my worry would be promoting this as magic medicines that could take away all of your problems and heal you, put you on top of your mountain and give you the mansion, give you the happy life, give you the finances. This is what I would be worried about.
Yeah. And like I said, people can have transformative experiences and be completely changed by a psychedelic experience. But more often than not, people will believe there's some change and sort of fall back into old habits or patterns. What I tell people when I get these notes every day, I need to take psychedelics. I got some mushrooms. I need to take them because I need to cure my depression. I'll immediately tell them every one of those clinical studies that you've been reading about with those miracle results. First of all, it's a limited population so far. We don't have thousands and thousands of results to judge from. Do psychedelics work? Absolutely they do. If you're asking me definitively, has that been proved scientifically at a point of critical mass? Not so far. It will, as soon as there's more funding available and more testing is done and more clinical studies are done. In the meantime, I know it works. But I'm sorry, what was the original question? I just went off on a tangent.
Yeah, because of the mainstream push for promoting
that's right.
them.
All right.
Yeah.
So I told them that every one of these clinical studies includes a substantial therapeutic component, meaning there is counseling and therapy before and after the experience. Mm-hmm. A good friend of mine, John Saul, who also runs integration circles with me, was part of the MAP study. He had a life-threatening disease which caused him anxiety. So he got into the MAPS MDMA studies. And he said he was on the placebo. He didn't know it at the time, but he had 3 sessions. And when he got done, they said, okay, sorry, you had the placebo. So he had a session, therapy, session, therapy, session, therapy, session, therapy. Then they said, well, you had the placebo. So in a study such as this, where it's not just a voluntary thing, they said, since this is so bad, we're going to go ahead and give you the regular treatment now. He said, that was the best thing that could have happened to me because I got twice as much therapy. That's what saved my life. These studies are called psychedelic-assisted therapy, not therapy-assisted psychedelics. So it's possible to do these things on your own. It's possible to do them with someone else, but people should know that just taking the substance is not what has produced the results that we're all reading about and that cause us so much enthusiasm so far. So far, it has been assisted by some sort of help, which I think is a great idea. I'm very pro-therapy. I'm very pro getting help of some kind because it's impossible to see your own blind spots.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's just perfect. And this is why we have these conversations as well for our podcast, because we need to talk about all aspects of it, not just that they are incredibly helpful and they help us heal and transform, but also what are those little nuances and details that come with it? It's not just taking the substance, but what can we do and what can we surround it with and how can we use them and integrate them in our lives? And it shouldn't be just one off. Like this is another conversation. Oh, one time ayahuasca and then that's it. You're done. It's never done, right? It's, some people work with medicine for years, 7, 8, ongoingly, because every part or every stage of their life requires different way of working and different way of integration. So there is an ongoing work.
Yeah, I should say in this process, well, first of all, I'm sorry, but, therapy in between sessions is not sexy. That's not going to make headlines. Taking a pill and curing depression is going to make headlines. So, the news is either really good or really bad. And it's always slanted because it's supposed to make us click on things and buy things. I mean, that's what it's for. It's not there for the most part to really inform us. So we shouldn't rely just on the media for that. But going back to the medicine, yes, that can be an ongoing process. Unfortunately, there are some people who don't do anything between their medicine sessions and just keep going back to the medicine. This is what I did my first few times. I thought I must need to keep doing this. Well, no. Then you just go back to the medicine again without making any changes during your life. Then you are looking forward to that next experience. You are doing the opposite of the place where I believe you should be, where you are happy with what's going on now and not trying to find happiness in the future. If I'm not making improvements based on those experiences, then I'm waiting for the experiences to take me away from my life and be incredible things so that I can go back again later and do it again. Well, this is the idea of integration. Some of it sounds very boring and humdrum at the time, but all of these things that we do get us closer to that experience of being full, more fulfilled and more whole and happier where we are right now in this moment. Alan Watts once said, the only reason that hearing the sound of my voice in this very moment is not the most fascinating thing you could possibly be doing is because your brain is telling you that something else would be better. That really struck me.
Yeah, that's amazing. Wow. So, Greg, can we talk about the way that you work with your clients and the way that you take them through, and maybe you can give us some, golden nuggets around this integration, and if, of course, we'll have your links and your details as well for our listeners to find you if they're being called to work with you and have that integration session, or however they wish to. What does your sessions look like? For example, if I was to come to you, for example, how do you start? How do you onboard people? How do you work with them? Do you choose people, or do you reject sometimes people to work with? Like, how does it all work out in the process?
Rejecting, I would say that if there is someone who have a very strong feeling that, a lot of people will say, oh, I understand that I have to put in the work afterwards, but I can tell. I mean, someone once said to me, I believed you when you said that, I wasn't going to be changed by this experience alone, but I know that now that I'm done, there is a little part of me that was still saying, maybe that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Well, some people, you get a very strong feeling that they do think that I'm just going to take these and I don't need to do anything afterwards. And that does happen with some people. They'll disengage after the experience because they don't want to go any further. And that's fine. That's where they're at. For the most part, I tend to take people where they are. I am cautious about people who doubt that they'll have to do anything after the experience. There's not much I can do with someone like that. They'll go have the experience by themselves, but if they don't think that they'll need to do something after the experience, then, I should probably tell them this may not be a fit.
Yeah.
Probably about the only restriction that I have. But as far as how I work with people, I tend to work with people where they are right now. So the things that have been addressed so far in different types of therapies are generally what happened to me. Why am I this way? What were the situations that caused this? Where did my trauma start? All of this. People come to me all the time and say, I spent years in therapy and all we talked about was what happened and trying, rehashing it. Well, at a certain point, the who, what, where, why, when, and how don't matter that much. We've talked about that. We've come to the somatic. I'm going to get this trauma that's being held out of my body. There are even some new psychedelic facilitation methods for that. There's a Comey. There are a lot of different things that are helping people get stuff out of their bodies. What that leaves us with is what I call the manifestations of our trauma. And I'll say that trauma can have a small t, can have a capital T. Everyone has some sort of trauma. And I do believe that word is overused, but it's the best one I have for this. But the manifestations of our trauma are what happened when this happens and I react. So if person Y says something, I can react one way and you react in a completely different way. That's based on our past. There's a black box here that makes it mean something. If I'm walking down the street and I see a car a block from me crash into a wall and the person jumps out and then they point at me and say, this is your fault, I'll laugh and say, that's a crazy person. I've never seen in my life. Obviously, it's not my fault. Then I go home and my partner knocks over a glass that I left on the table and they turn around very angry and say, this is your fault. All of a sudden that bothers me. It's the same words. There's context behind it. It's very mysterious how the things that happened to us a long time ago lead us to do or not do certain things that we would rather change. So there are things I do every day that I don't want to do. There are things I don't want to do that I do. This is because my brain thinks it would be a very bad idea for me to change. And there are a lot of explanations to this, but let's just say that you're locked into those things because of something that happened a long time ago. What's left over is that reaction. That thing that I do, I don't want to do, and that thing I don't want to do that I do. If we can somehow replace, modify, or take that action out, we have effectively, in many ways, cut our ties to that trauma. The who, what, why, where, when, and how is back there now. And there's nothing left of it unless I dwell on it and think about it. But the only thing that ties me to is that every time I do that thing, it strengthens it. And my brain says somewhere way in the back, it's a good thing you did that. That was dangerous. You needed to do that. And it gets strengthened. Once I stop that, I've done this myself. When there is something like that that you stop doing, then after a while, it's difficult at first. And after a while, when the thing happens, you don't do it, you can feel the weight of the world come off of your shoulders. It's incredibly how stressful it is running around trying to control the universe so that it's a safe place for you. It just can't be done. It's an illusion. We might as well be looking at a movie screen and telling the character on the screen what to do. Turn left, go over there, pick that up, talk to that guy. Everything's cool as long as he's cooperating. Then he doesn't do it. We say, what the hell? It's the same thing. I'm telling myself what to do every day. Then I don't do what I want, or I do what I don't want. What's the difference? I have much less control over this than I think, but I drive myself nuts every day thinking that I am controlling what's going on and I'm keeping things safe and quiet for myself. So a lot of what I do has to do with that. Stimuli and reaction. This thing that happens here is the thing that's disturbing me. The action that I take is keeping me locked into a pattern. So that's where we tend to work on things. That's a big part of what I do, but mostly it's when I talk to people, what's happening with you now? What's been happening recently? We don't have to worry about them so much. We learn about that. So we have an idea of where these things come from, because people like to know that as well. Sometimes I'll explain to them, when this happens, you probably act this way. It's not uncommon. A lot of people do that because people tend to think that it's just them doing these things. A lot of them are very common patterns.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thanks for explaining the process. You said something about if somebody disengages and kind of goes away after this experience and they don't want to go any further. I really like that you mentioned, because I think a lot of people usually do that. And what are your thoughts? Is it because somehow we haven't associated between, you said integration is something like you've got to bring the experience into your daily life. And I usually call it the becoming better navigator in the 3 dimension, the physical life, right? Becoming a better, for me, integration would be that. But somehow many people are really stuck in that space of associating psychedelic medicines with a divine connection, transpersonal, and somehow they just want to go there, be there, escape. I don't want to be in my body. I want to go there. That's my territory. But I don't want to be in my life. It's because I've got a job. Now I got to do this. I've got to take care of that. This is hard. So it's almost like there is a huge gap between even the idea, why do we even take psychedelic medicines? Like, what is the point? If it's just escaping the body, connecting to divine, and being in that space all the time, which isn't really useful. I always get curious and wonder, why do we even take these medicines? For me, it's always been a trauma-informed or, transpersonal, or at least becoming a better navigator in the 3D. That would be my idea of coming to psychedelic medicines, just like I would go to do movement practice or breath work or any other, just to make my life a little bit more easier here now, what I'm engaging in. But this is almost like lately I've had some conversations where people almost just come to psychedelics because they want the divine connection and that higher levels of consciousness and all of that. But forget the 3D, forget cooking in the morning or for your family or going to work. Like, none of that. It's almost like that's so far away. Then I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say here. There's
Absolutely.
massive, please speak to that as well. What are your thoughts? Be interested.
Yeah, there are 2 things here. One is people will disengage sometimes. They just don't want to go any further. And that's often because the unknown is scary. You mentioned being in your body. Embodiment is a big part of my practice because most people don't experience themselves as being in their bodies. And a lot of people are going to hear this and say, well, that's silly. I'm in my body. Of course I am. But most of the time when we become upset, our psyche cuts us off from the neck down, or we're not aware of what's happening in our body, because it's impossible to feel an emotion in your brain. It feels like that's where we feel it because that's where the thinking happens. We get used to this is where the processing is. But every emotion that you feel is a sensation or a combination of sensations in your body. Your brain just tells you what it means. That's all it does. And it's often wrong. But if you learn to feel what's going on in your body, you're going to do a lot better at getting where you want to go. But I think that there's also a difference between people who disengage. Some people just don't want to do anything after the experience. That's completely up to them. But there's also a complaint from many coaches that says people don't want to do the work. They're very frustrated because they say people say they want to do the work, but they don't. Well, that's a mistake on the counselor's part often. that means that those people aren't ready for the work that you're trying to present to them. And you need to give them something else. We can only move through certain levels at a time. I can't hand someone the sacred text and let them be enlightened. There are always levels. I mean, every esoteric and wisdom system has this concept of some sort of level or progression. Chakra system, the koshas, what have you, they all say you move like this and you get higher and further. So people need to progress at their own speed. You can't just hand them something that's too big. You can't just say you need to confront your mother, when they've had a traumatic upbringing. You take people through these things and you help them in the ways that you can, and you find something that works for them. And gradually you find something else that works for them. This is a big lesson that most counselors and helpers and a lot of therapists even need to understand, that people may not be ready for what you think they need. And this is part of the problem with thinking that you know what's best for someone. We have to understand that no matter how much we want to grab somebody and shake them and say, dude, listen to me, that's not what happens. They can't hear you yet. I'll tell you a story I often tell clients. Well, I read this in a book somewhere years ago, and I can't even remember the book, so apologies to the author, but it's been highly paraphrased. A man and his wife go to Las Vegas on vacation, and they decide to see a professional hypnotist show. While they're there, the hypnotist says, I need a volunteer from the audience. And the wife says, you should do that. So he wants to be a good sport. He goes up and the guy hypnotizes him, has him act like a chicken or whatever, and then says, I'm now going to give you a post-hypnotic suggestion. You're not going to remember this, but when I wake you up, whenever I touch my tie, you have to take your coat off. When I take my finger off my tie, you have to put your coat back on. You're not going to remember this. You understand? Yes. Wakes him up. How do you feel? Do you remember acting like a chicken? The guy's embarrassed. Now, we all know that when you go to an auditorium for something, it's like 60 degrees in there. That's just how they keep these places. It's easier to keep places cool and let people bundle up than the other way around. You don't want people sweating. But those places are generally freezing. But this guy's talking to the hypnotist, and after a while, he puts his finger on his tie. It's 60 degrees, but this guy thinks I need to take my coat off. Now, as a human being, when we have been programmed to take a certain action, when the stimuli happens and we have to do that thing, for instance, this guy has to take his coat off. If his arms just moved and took his coat off, he'd think, what are my arms doing? In this instance, as humans, what we do is our brain comes up with a reason for it. It tells this guy, it's hot in here. It even controls the chemicals in his brain and moves them around and produces some. Sweat starts coming down his forehead. He says, it's hot. Do you mind if I take off my coat? The guy says, no. Takes off his coat and has no idea that he's freezing. His brain says it's hot. After a while, the guy takes his finger off and he says, oh, I got a chill now. I need to put my coat back on. Talk for a while, finger on the coat. He says, that's weird. This coat usually fits, but now it's really tight. I need to take it off. Finger off, coat goes back on. This is what we do. Something happens to us, usually when we're small, and our subconscious steps in and says, don't worry. From now on, when that happens, I'm going to make sure you do or don't do, say or don't say this, and you won't get hurt again. These turn into the bad habits and patterns and ways of being and thinking that we don't like. This is what we're dealing with when someone doesn't want to do the work. The guy is hypnotized. You can't just walk up to him and tell him, dude, it's cold in here. He's sweating. He's going to tell you, what are you, nuts? I'm sweating. It's hot in here. They just don't hear. They're not ready. You need to do something else if someone's not ready to do the work that you're presenting to them. In NLP, we have a saying that says, if what you're doing isn't working, try something else. Try anything else, but try something else.
That's beautiful. Thanks for that, Greg. It's a bit like Carolyn Mace. She's one of my online mentors, and I've been listening to her for a long time. And in one of her lectures, she said, just because we're in the information technology age and everybody gets access to everything so quickly without being ready, it sounds a bit like that. And she said, back in the day, even the question or the self-inquiry question of who am I? For example, if you were to join a monastery or any kind of temple, you would never get to ask that question on your first day. You would have to wash dishes, sweep the floor, make the bed for months. And then, progressively, at some point, you will be allowed to ask this question. So it's a bit like that. And I really like that example that you gave us. Yes. So I think we need to honor people's progresses and where they are and accept. And I love what you said also. Don't assume that everybody needs help and we can help everybody. I think this is really dangerous too. which we see. Yeah.
One thing coaches should be aware of also is that there may come a time where, first of all, you may not be able to work with a person because they bring up strong feelings in you. And they may be presenting with a problem that is outside your scope of practice. So everyone in the helping profession should know when it's appropriate to refer people and have a network of people they can refer to, and know that they need to pull themselves out of the picture sometimes if necessary.
Yeah, that's really valuable. Thank you so much. As we're coming to end of our conversation, my favorite question nowadays is, what are you seeing in this space currently, in psychedelic space? What are your observations? If there's anything you'd like to share that you think is valuable, just the psychedelic renaissance in itself, it's growing and expanding globally. I know US is always a few steps ahead. That's what I see. I feel like UK, we hear a little bit more reserved. We're following the footsteps, but also there is, are people just reserved in nature? And I see a lot more movement happening in the US. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, the mainstreaming with psychedelics is bringing in people from all walks of life. So, it used to be a certain alternative culture or certain people that were drawn to plant medicine and psychedelics. And that's just not the case anymore. We've got all kinds of people involved with microdosing, all the clinical studies, all the mainstream press that's coming out. This movement is going to change into one that's got a very broad cultural base, and we're going to have to be able to withstand that. I think they're also starting to see cracks in the facade as far as maybe certain facilitators or helpers or leaders in this industry are being called out on certain things that may or may not be true. But the way that we are responding to those things shows that we're not ready for prime time yet. So facilitator D says something somewhere about their actions, and people say, hey, I don't know if that's on the level. I don't know what's going on with this guy. And immediately they're attacked by people saying, he's a good guy. You should shut up. This is hard for him. Rather than learning that, someone has to respond to these things when certain allegations or charges come up. We need to stand back and let the person respond in a mature way and not, take our stand and stand up for our friend, because that's not how things are going to work. These are things that are coming from certain people inside the culture right now. But as soon as the mainstream press gets tired of having the happy stories about psychedelics and starts reporting on some of the bad things that happen inside of psychedelics and psychedelic facilitation, there are going to be some hit pieces out, and we're going to have to know how to respond as a community. We're not quite ready for that yet. We should be. I also see, I'm a coach. I'm very much about self-help, personal and spiritual development, but I don't think that everyone has to do that. That's not my mantra. There are a lot of people right now who disparage the capitalist work ethic and how I'm supposed to slave and work and get up at this time in the morning and work all these years. But when it comes to psychedelics, they're only too happy to tell people, you need to do the work. You need to put in the work. You got to do what's necessary. You got to meditate. You got to journal. You got to do yoga. When did we turn into these people of telling people what they have to do? No one has to do anything. You, me, no one on this planet really needs to do anything in this moment to be different. Maybe they can improve, maybe they can change, but that's not up to me to say. And I don't need to be slavishly telling people that they need to do the work, like this is some arduous thing that I need to do. Yes, there is discipline to these things, but you don't make it grueling for people. You don't constantly drum into people. They're doing it wrong. You should do it this way. I don't like to put shoulds on psychedelics, except that you should be safe and responsible, meaning you're not bringing harm to yourself or other people. Outside of that, it's not my business what you do. It's completely up to you what you want to do with your body, your consciousness, and the substances that you choose to consume as a human being. You are a sovereign being and you have that right. It's not up to me to tell you what to do, but somehow we have turned into this workforce of drones telling people that they need to do the work and get better. I think that we just need to back up a little bit and not be so strict about what people need to do or should do when they take psychedelic substances.
Yeah. Wow, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. What a great closing. I love that. It sounds a bit like, I think recently I discovered somebody in the self-help field. I think there's a page called Healing from the Healing, Healing from Healing,
yes,
right?
I've seen that.
Yeah. It's a bit like that. We need to, I love the aspect of, just relax, let go. Like, yeah.
We don't need to create more reasons for people not to be happy with themselves.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things we really don't need.
Yeah, surely, thousands of years ago, indigenous people, they didn't really care about waking up 5 a.m. and having a checklist done by 12 o'clock and using psychedelics to do this even more amplified version of this. I'm sure they didn't care about any of this. I'm sure they didn't take microdosing to finish a whole day's schedule sooner or, step into flow states. I'm sure they were taking it to maybe hunt to feed their family. So it's okay. I think we need to chill out a little bit more. I like that.
I agree.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Greg. It's been a pleasure and it's been an honor. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's been all mine. I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much, Susan.
Brilliant. Thank you. And we will definitely add your contacts and some of your information in the show notes. So for our listeners, if they wanted to get in touch and follow you and connect with you, and also if they want to ask a question, please do comment in the below in the comments, and don't be shy. Get in touch with Greg and myself, and all the best. Thank you for tuning in. I see you guys on the next one. Bye for now. Thank you so much for joining us. Psychedelic Conversations podcast is designed to educate, inform, and expand awareness. For more information, please head over to psychedelicconversations.com. You can also share with your friends or leave a review so that we can reach more people. You can also join us in our private Facebook group to keep the conversation going. This show is for information purposes only, and it is not intended to provide mental health or medical advice. Thanks for listening.